Hey, the last few weeks I've been here, sometimes I'll use a word, etymology. It means like looking at words and how they're formulated. And I like to use that word because it makes me sound smart. And it's really unusual for me to speak multi-syllable words, but I want to just mention a couple of people I want to honor this morning. And because I love the energy and the enthusiasm they brought into this space already. David, our worship leader, what would we do without him? And if you're new here, you go, wow, this guy lifts us all up every time he leads. And the same for Will, Pastor Will, just here. I was thinking about the word, do you know this? But I'm going to give it to you. By the way, my message hasn't started yet, so nobody's hit the go button yet. But I'm giving you a little extra at no extra charge. And the word enthusiasm, just a little lesson here on how the Greek language works and how that informs a lot of English. And even if you have another mother tongue, you will notice some of these some of the way this works, but there's a participle N, E-N, and that means in. And then there's this other word from which we get theos. Like for some of you, this is really fun. Like just stick with me. But the word enthusiasm, theos, is theos. It means God. So the etymology, the history of the word enthuse or enthusiasm, it means in God or God within. And I wanted to honor, like I said, David as a worship leader and Pastor Will. I don't know how you do it, man. You bring enthusiasm, and it's natural for you. Sometimes I know you got to dig in and go for it, but man, you have made our lives better. So although we could applaud so many this morning, this is who I want to applaud. And when I say that, I literally mean applaud. All right, now I'm just going to hit on one other thing. I did it earlier also, but when there's this reference to the renovation beyond the wall, it's always a soft pitch around here in terms of generosity. And I was not asked to do this. I just had a reflection from yesterday as I was remembering a pastoral friend of mine, a fellow pastor. I am not a pastor. I have not been a pastor for something like 40 years. I was for 6 years. I mean, I'm 67 now, and I'm forgetting all the numbers on that. But this friend of mine, Steve, back in Wisconsin, he told a story that I just want to parrot back for a moment because I think it says something about generosity. So they were doing in their church a special offering for something like this, you know, the above and beyond the walls, like expand the space, etc. And the ushers in that church, they would collect offerings. Around here, that never happens. You know, you have opportunity and there's invitations. But on this one particular Sunday, as they were collecting this particular offering for this renovation, shall we say, something unusual happened. And the ushers, those who were collecting the offering, cornered the pastor, Steve, after this service and said, "We got something unusual today in the offering." And it feels heavy for a moment, and it could be heavy, but I want to say something really liberating. And my friend Steve, they showed him there was a wedding ring in the offering basket. Now, as soon as they say that, we get really quiet because it does feel heavy, like what happened, right? We don't know. Was it the end of a marriage? Or was it, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just like, hey, I got grandma's ring. And this is part of my offering, you know, into this space. We don't really know what that meant. No, it's unusual, but my friend Steve said something brilliant then, and I just want to call us up into this in the moment. And when he told me this, I thought it was worth parroting. He says, you know what, whatever that meant, it meant someone was trading in a memory for the sake of a dream. Right? They were taking something. Maybe it was corrupted and difficult and hard, or it was just something accumulated that would be a memory. I've received this, but I'm actually going to sort of cash this in for a dream. And I want you to hang on to that thought. Of course, to participate in the renovation, great. But I think also as we go into this message today, we continue this series called Listen In. Even as you prayed us in, Will, you were referring to, may we see ourselves for who we are. And let that inform us, theologically and who we want to be. But you know what's interesting? In a sense, what we say whenever we call ourselves toward grace, we're saying, let's cash in a memory. It could be a corrupted memory. But let's cash that in and allow that to go into this dream of knowing that I am who I say I am. Okay? So, if you're carrying something heavy today, we don't want that. Now, if you're not a Christ follower, you need to know that you cannot fix yourself. And coming into full grace of receiving Jesus as your Savior, just opening your hands and saying, please come, please, I trust you as my Savior. That's what it's about. It's not our own perfection. And last week, some of you will remember, we pulled out a tape measure and we counted out a certain number of centimeters. And some of you, do you remember this? If you weren't here last week, I think it'd be worth watching. But it was all this thing about understanding that forgiven people are forgiving people. And there was a punctiliar moment of me taking a scissors and going, just cutting off a thread at the end saying, hey, let's just remember, as forgiven people, objects of grace, we need to be on a forgiveness journey. All right, so I said a whole lot at once. Actually, you might remember the string on the screen, and that was that was where we were going last week. Now, today, what we're doing on this series of parables of Jesus, these were moments when Jesus was going to try to make a big point about something, so he put it in the form of a story. They might be real stories, like I know of this incident, or it might have been an imaginative story where he's saying, the story is told, right? But what he's doing is he's calling us to listen in because there's something powerful, all right? Now, today, there is something powerful when we're about to turn into Luke chapter 18. And if you have your own Bible, you know how to find that. But we're gonna look at something relative to the idea that knowing that down is up, and sometimes up is down, and even a 25-degree turn in life is a powerful move that we can make today. So, hang on. I already told you. I'm 67 years old, and I am taking you back. Somebody do the math. But it was when I was turning 13 years old. So I think that's 54, and, I'm insecure when I do math in front of people. But it was a while back. But what I'm telling you, I remember very deeply because of the community in the specific place that I grew up in, northeast Wisconsin. If there was a little plot of land, it was the footprint, and my last name is Niebel, and we would. I actually grew up in a house built by my great-grandfather. Intermittently could grow up in another house right next door that was where my dad was born. My mother grew up across the street, and I mean. It still says in the sidewalk there, Niebel. All right. Now, we had a back apartment, a small studio apartment, about maybe 20 feet by 20 feet, attached to this house that I was growing up in. And it was occupied all the while that I was ever in that house by a guy named Johnny. Johnny was an old guy, and I mean old, like 70. Thank you for laughing because I know you're doing math there as well. But Johnny was my buddy. And he was an important part of my life. He had actually worked for my dad for a while. He was one of these guys, if you grew up in like a farming or an agrarian community from the U.S., some of you remember, but sometimes you see in people missing appendages. Something got hurt. And in his case, he was missing a thumb. But this guy was a gem in my life. And he's the guy where he was like the guy that I could count on to be a buddy. So he would take me out in his Jeep and let me drive before anybody else could drive. I don't even know if the parents ever heard that growing up. And then there were other things that, taking me fishing, and we just had a camaraderie. Now, it's my 13th birthday. I'm coming home from school. I walk in the house, and my mom says, Johnny wants to see you. So I remember leaving my stuff. I went out the front door, went around the back, went up to his little studio apartment that he rented from us. I can still smell it. I can smell that space. I can see the darkness of the space on the black and white television, and I just know the moment, and I could flash back to that in any instance. Now, I go up, and again, I'm up this stairs, creak. I go in, and Johnny, of course, welcomes me in, and he says, well, I understand it's your 13th birthday. And I said, yeah, yes, sir. And he said, well, I have something special for you, but we have to wait. So probably jumped down on that couch, and we talked a little bit, but finally we could hear the noise in the background, and that's what Johnny was waiting for. We could hear a vehicle pull into this expansive driveway that we had, which had, it was like covered, or it was gravel, so you could, if you listened in enough, you could hear that crinkling. And he says, well, we're ready. So we get up, and there was a truck in the backyard next to what we called the barn. It was a 20-foot by 30-foot building that really was a barn at one time. And he said, let's go. So we go back there, and the truck that is there is from an asphalt company named Beeson. And it's just said Beeson Asphalt Company. And then Johnny informed me that for my 13th birthday, he was building me a basketball court. This was before I had my growth spurt, by the way. Before I just shot right up. But we go out there, and this guy has a clipboard, and he gets out, and he's got his clipboard, and I remember the numbers on this, like I already told you, 20 by 30. But I swear I remember this to this very day, because we pulled out with a tape measure 30 feet across the expanse of that mini barn. And then we went out to a tree line that was 33 feet. Why I remember that, I don't know, but I remember it. This moment was so sealed in my mind. And the guy is drawing the barn, and he's drawing the 30 feet and the 33 feet, and they were making plans because it was all going to happen a couple of weeks later. And I swear, just imagine a 13-year-old boy getting a basketball court, and it became the Taj Mahal of my neighborhood. Like, wow, Tom Nebel has this basketball court. And, we were electrical contractors, so we had lighting there, and we painted out the key, if you know what I'm talking about. And it was just great. I think I could still hit that corner shot. I think I could hit a corner jump shot. Well, the day came when they were going to build this thing. And I swear, I'm in my upper bedroom, and I'm hearing sounds, and I'm so excited, looking out over the backyard, and you can see they're bringing in their equipment. It was all the stuff, the digging for this, and there was enough people. There were probably 3 people on the job, and there was enough of this activity out there, so I'm just excited. I'm watching this happen, and I'm seeing they're digging not where the court's going to be, but really on the other side of the barn. It was they had to work with the driveway, and there were some things like that. And I'm watching, and I'm just curious, when are they going to start digging for the court itself? And as it's going on, they're doing a lot of digging on the north side, not on the east side of the barn. And I made my way downstairs, and I said to my mom, I don't think they know where they're digging. And she says, well, go tell them. Now, again, this is before my growth spurt, but I've always been a guy who's been willing to confront things, but sometimes very intimidated. In that moment, I was intimidated, but I went back there, and there's enough noise, and you eventually catch somebody's eyes, and maybe the foreman, let's say, looked over at me, and I just waved, and I screamed, aren't you supposed to be digging over there? And he comes closer. I yelled it again, aren't you supposed to be digging over there? And he just puts his finger up, and he walks back to his truck cab, and he pulls out the clipboard that has, some of you will remember, carbon paper, like it was a double of it, right? And he looks at, and I'm standing there, and he just puts the clipboard in front of me, and I looked at him, camera angle. I'm looking at him. I'm looking around. I'm looking at the barn. And now you have to watch me. Gotta watch what's happening right now. He's handed this to me, and I just did this. Do I need to play that again? He hands it to me. I just went this. And he said, I don't even know any cuss words. But he said something like, rats. And he told his other guys to kill the engine. And guess what? They were digging on the wrong side of the barn. Now, what was missing on the drawing? Somebody just shouted out, what was missing? Yeah, true north. Exactly. In fact, just look at the screen here. You're going to see we've got that. It's just the idea that you got to give some orientation. So you would, on a map like that, normally put a little N and an arrow, just so someone would know which way they're dealing. So guess what? They had to spend the whole day putting that thing back together. They couldn't come back till the next day. They were doing a lot of unnecessary digging, and it would have been unnecessary had they began with the true north, and the confusion was going to happen. Okay, now I took you on a story there because it is going to set us up for today. And just think for a moment, metaphorically, where could have or should have the true north been in your life? Okay. Now, none of us hit it perfectly every time. Even as objects of grace, when we sing these songs, I am who you say I am, really what we're reminding ourselves is even though our calibration is wrong, and we're so totally imperfected, that God says, guess what? You have a true north. That's who we have in Jesus. Now, if you do not know Jesus as your Savior, those are big words, important words that I'm saying. If you feel like you're on the outside looking in, we're just saying it's a free gift, and it's offered to you to not get by on your own compass, but to get by on the compass of Jesus, to say, I receive this gift of salvation. We'll pray with you at the end of the service, or right now, just in your heart, start telling the Lord, I'm following you. I need what you have. I need what you have. I cannot do it on my own. So I said earlier, the way to down is up, but I'm also going to suggest something else as we look into this parable where Jesus is now saying, y'all listen in. Okay, that sometimes really what we need is an objective look at the map and a 25-degree turn. Okay, now I'm saying that. You understand, I'm saying metaphorically, I don't care if it's 23 or 24 or 25, but I am saying, you know what, on occasion, we have to know what we're really looking at, and we have to look at ourselves in the mirror, although even looking at ourselves in the mirror, sometimes we are looking from the side, we're not getting the accurate picture, and this is why in the work that I do, and again, I was only a pastor for a period of time, then I led some things related to starting new churches, but I am a consultant. I work with companies to get their relational intelligence and their communication going so they're not getting out of whack here. But what I'm describing here is that on occasion, we need to know what it's like to be on the other side of ourselves. And there's really only one person in the world that cannot speak to that objectively. Who is that person? You. That person, me. And there are so many times in life when I would be resistant to what people would see in me that it was only to my own peril. Okay? But on occasion, we get a little wake up and we say, wow, I am imperfected. I can live in that imperfection. I can let people see my imperfection. Very similar to one of the songs we sang earlier in the service. And there's really gold in the hills of those who are willing to have an objective look at themselves and not live in a fabricated world of make-believe that I've got to be somebody I'm really not. Hope that's enough of a setup as we are looking now at Luke chapter 18. And we're going to begin at verse 9. And the version I have in front of me is a little different from what is on the screen. So I'm going to do a little double looking because I want to stay consistent, yet also tell you something else kind of cool right in the beginning. So we're looking, and this is wild stuff, but but sink into it for a moment. Now, there's an editorial comment from Luke who is writing this, and look what he says. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else. Does that sound like anybody you know or have known or experienced or see in the mirror? Look down on everyone else. Jesus told this parable, and you can see what he's setting up here. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Now just hang on to that for a moment, but I'm also going to give you another word in just a moment that comes from my translation, and it might come from yours. It's just the way that people have taken these texts and made them, put them into English. But just keep in mind what we've got is a bifurcation here of a Pharisee who, he says to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else. He's talking about these religious guys that had rule upon rule and legalism upon legalism, and then there was this tax collector who should be the bad guy, but turns out to be the one who is rather looking up and down, and the Pharisee is looking left and right. And I don't know if when he has this little prayer moment, if he's speaking out loud or not, but it sure seems minimally he's full of himself, and he could very well be broadcasting his internal thoughts. Now, I'm just going to give you one other word as we start to unpack this. In my version, this is not what we have up on the screen here, but I want to read to you the verse 9 again, but just pay attention to the word that was not in what's on the screen. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Yipes, stripes, that's a heavy word, contempt. And here's what it means. Contempt means a moral righteousness that believes in your superiority or my superiority. Now, how did I learn this word? From a counselor who saw me and said, Tom, you have no clue what it's like to be on the other side of yourself. You are full of contempt. Now, look at this slide. Here's what contempt means. Guess what? This is a human body language unavoidable reality, and it's across every culture. The song we sang earlier about every tongue, every tribe, every. This is across humanity. When a person feels like they have moral superiority over someone else, and it could be over anything, the way that person is driving, right? Or the way that person is looking at their device all the time, or the way, it doesn't matter, it's just universal. But here's what will happen in terms of body language. A small print here says, lip corner is raised and tensed on one side only. It's a tell. It's a tell. I was in the U.S. Post Office not long ago, and the postal clerk had contempt on her face. I mean, over a situation, and I could see what was going on. As soon as she felt it, you know what she did? She announced to everyone in the postal room. It was a small post office, but she said, hey, everybody, I got to apologize. Sometimes my face goes places I don't want it to go. I thought, wow, talk about me, right? But when you ever see that happen in you or someone else under a condition like that, they've just entered into contempt. Does anybody, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever seen it or felt it or do it? So just look at somebody like for the fun of it and go like that. And you're going to feel it viscerally, when people, do that. All right. I tried it yesterday because I used to be natural at this, and I think there's some celebratory thing in me where at least I'm getting unlocked from some of that because it's not as natural for me these days. But as soon as I say that, watch me on the drive today. Alrighty. So that's the setup, and we're going to move on now to the next, kind of a reset of the verse. So it says the Pharisee. Remember, this is the superstar religious person. Now, and I'm imagining in his own mind, he knows he can't live up to this stuff, right? But look at what his prayer is. And it just feels to me like he's He's saying it out loud as Jesus again is telling the story. Maybe this is a true story. Jesus maybe just saw this. Okay, or maybe Jesus has been dreaming up this story for a while and ready for the time to unload it. But I'm sure people were listening in. I'm sure there were Pharisees listening in. We just heard our dog whistle. And there might have been tax collectors listening in as well, because the tax collectors were kicked to the curb, sometimes because they should have been. They were dishonest. But in this case, let's look. The Pharisee stood by himself. Now that's interesting, because Pharisees' gaze is around. Stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. Yipes. Yipes. I fast twice a week and I give a tenth of all I get. And you can sure count on me for the renovation fund, right? Just making it known. And by the way, where do I get my brick? Right? But there's a self-righteousness that everybody else can sniff out. In other words, only one person really doesn't know what it's like to be on the other side of themselves. I'm pretty sure anybody else looking around would have gone, what a clown. And probably even some of his fellow Pharisees. All right. So it's a setup there. And he's listing some important sins. But man, he's comparing himself to other people, or even like this tax collector. So he's got a resume there, but the resume is in a mirror and it's looking right back at him. So next, do we have the next? Yeah. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, right? His gaze was sort of up and down, but really it was down right now. He was in a place of contrition. He beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. All right. So back to the Pharisee. Have you heard the story about this? This guy goes into a pub in Ireland. Goes into an Irish pub. And he goes in and he's walking in. The bartender is asking him what he wants. And he just says, hey, I want 3 pints. And the bartender just double thinks, and you're by yourself. He's thinking. But he says, are you sure you want 3? Wouldn't you rather get them one at a time? They're a little fresher that way. And the guy says, I understand your objection, but let me tell you what's going on. I have 3 brothers. We would always drink together. Now, one has moved to Germany. Another one has moved to the U.S. And we just pledged that wherever we would go in life, we would always just we'd drink this way. 3 pints. Bartender says, okay, I got it. Doing that in reverence or memory or consolidation with your brothers. So a couple times a week he walks in. This has now become his pub. He walks in, gives the bartender the 3. The bartender knows what he's doing. Time after time after time. They're getting muscle memory on this. So several weeks into this relationship, the guy walks in, the bartender looks up at him to give him the 3. The guy looks back at him and goes, 2. Bartender's like double thinking on that. It's kind of quiet, just like it's quiet in here for a moment. And he says, oh, wow. So he pours 2 pints, brings them back. The guy's at his table. And he starts to walk away, but he's feeling self-conscious. So he says to the guy, he says, hey, stops. He says, hey, listen, it's your story to tell. I don't mean to insert, but if you need somebody to talk to, I'm here for you. I mean, it's got to be a heavy thing. I mean, everything it told me. And with the loss of a brother, I mean, that's no easy thing. So I'm here for you if you want. And the guy says, oh, no, my brothers are fine. It's just that I quit drinking. Pharisee, right? Going to assign things to others. Is unwilling to look in the mirror. And even when he looks in the mirror, is gonna kind of look askance. All right. So it mentions the Pharisee is by himself, everything, and the other tax collector. Well, they weren't always fair, but they were also sidelined. I mean, I'm sure many were fair, but some were not. And there was a gig, and there was a natural aggression, and all those things. But I was even thinking, by the way, in the U.S., our tax collection agency, it's called the Internal Revenue Service. And I'm sure anybody, when they identify they're with the Internal Revenue Service, they're going to get some joking or some ribbing about, you're the tax collectors. But I got to tell you, I had a tax issue. It was, I think, last spring, a year ago. No, last summer, so it might actually be about a year ago, where I needed to go in person to the office to present some ID stuff so they could return to me the money that I should have been given. But there was a protocol, and you had to go in person, and you had to bring ID and a couple of forms of ID, and it was to protect everything, including myself. But when I got into this place, first of all, now I live in Madison, Wisconsin area, but you don't see on the outside of this building, it does not say Internal Revenue Service. And when you find the place you're supposed to go, there's not a lot of signage. And when you get there, there's a guard, an armed guard, and they are not playing around. And then you are assigned a window and a room, and you're not messing around. Why? Because those tax collectors are not treated well. Okay. So here you've got a tax collector who has got some sobriety, because he's just saying, God, I need you. This is going to bother the Pharisees that are hearing Jesus tell this parable. It's also going to get the attention of those who are really broken, saying, wow, maybe there's a space for me. All righty. So in fact, here it is. The tax collector stood at a distance. Interesting, right? What does that mean? It's just, I don't feel like I belong. Some of you might feel that. Well, guess what you do? Just come to Jesus. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. There's a guy who at least knew himself. And he could see himself clearly enough, or maybe enough people spoke clearly enough to him. See, sometimes the way to up is really down. And back and forth, comparing ourselves to others hardly is. All right. Now, a week ago I mentioned this. I told a story about I'm on a founding board, and I'm a current co-president of something called the Wisconsin Inmate Education Association. Now, I got involved in this and helped start this thing because some people who really deeply hurt my family ended up in prison, and in one case died in prison. And there was a crazy thing that happened, how it all came about where I got involved in this. Now, what we do is provide an in-person, in-prison college education where inmates are getting a degree in Bible and in counseling. And it's for long-term inmates. It's not so much for people who are about to get out, but it's for long-term inmates. And it's designed then that when they get their degrees, they are sent around the prison system to become agents of change. Now hold on, we're going to come back to the text in a moment, but I've been dying to tell you this story because it speaks very deeply to this issue about the way to up being down, and something about a 25-degree turn. Okay, so what you're seeing here on the screen are a couple of our class speakers when they have gotten their degrees. Just like anywhere else where oftentimes someone from the class will be nominated to give a speech. And the fella on the upper left hand, this was last summer, and there were about a dozen inmates getting their degree that day. And they would refer to one another as Mr. fact, in the classes, for some of them, they've never been given that dignity ever in their life to be called Mr. And prison it's a hard thing. And the guy who was speaking on behalf of the class was talking about how hard it was, how hard this degree was, especially in the cacophony of this maximum security prison and all the stuff that they went through. And he was so solid, truthful, and receiving of grace. And then he told a story about one of his fellow classmates. Now here's the gold. He's referring to one of these guys right in the front row who's got his cap and gown on and is about to move the tassel over. And let's just say his last name was Jones. So he says, I'm going to tell you something about Mr. Jones. Now, there's a crowd about this big full of family members who've never, some of these guys are seeing their babies, meaning their 18-year-old daughter for the first time. It's just like crazy, all this stuff going on in this place. And then you got Department of Corrections, and you've got other inmates up in the bleachers who are in the classes. They're maybe a sophomore, junior, or freshman, and then people, well-wishers and donors and everything else. This is all done without taxpayer expense, by the way, since we're on the tax side of it. So, as this speaker is talking to all of us, he's referring to Mr. Jones, one of his classmates, and he says, in Wisconsin, there is a pathway for those who have been wrongfully accused, and that will happen. People will be imprisoned for things they never did. But he said, Mr. Jones here has been serving time for more than a decade for a crime he never committed. Now, can you imagine the tension in that room? You got inmates, some who are feeling it. You got family members who know. You've got people from the Department of Corrections that are, it was tension. It was quiet as could be. It says for a crime he did not commit. And he said, but I'm going to tell you how people change and how they're, not his words, but mine, when they're exposed to God and they're exposed on this journey. And he said, we're telling this story for the first time, but Mr. Jones here, people are just quiet, just like right now. And he says, for a crime he never committed. And he said, he was on this pathway to get out. There are ways you can work and you can get legal representation if the evidence can play in your favor. These things we'll revisit. He was on this liberation pathway, and he gathered all of us in the class. He said this was months ago, but he gathered all of us in the class. He said, listen in, boys. I got to tell you something. I've been living a lie. I did commit the crime. And you all know that by me telling you this, it means we're going forward. And I will never get out. But he said this, I would rather live inside the walls, meaning pay the price, experience the consequence. I would rather live inside the walls liberated than to live outside the walls and imprisoned by what I know is true. Wow. I wish you could see that. You could see the speech, but I wish you could have seen the crowd then, including the Secretary of Corrections going, because they love what we're doing in this program, but even the Secretary of Corrections is saying, wow, look at what happens. See, this is what Jesus invites us to, is be real. You heard, we were talking earlier, like there's men's Bible study or a thing going to happen for habitual sin. Guess what? Men, you show up there, you're not getting anybody pointing a finger of shame at you. You're just going, oh yeah, you too, right? That's sort of the message. In fact, let's go back to the text because there's a little wrap up here. It says, okay, stood at a distance, and what's following right this? Verse 14, thank you. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God, for all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exhausted. That's our first step. But isn't that powerful? Like Jesus is now tying this up and saying, this is how it works. The way to up is down, and a 25-degree turn will make a world of difference. Okay. Now there is a word in there called justified, and we will sing that song sometimes that has that word. But in English, maybe not in your native tongue, but there is something powerful in that word justified. You can say it this way: it's just if I'd never sinned. Thank you, sister. You're hearing it, and you know that. Just if I'd never sinned. That's the gift that God gives us. And you don't have to live the internal, you don't have to live the lie. You don't. You can just say, gosh, this is who I am. And maybe there's a result that happens that feels uncomfortable for a while, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable for eternity, right? The way to up is down. So if you do feel like you're on the outside looking in, come to Jesus today. Just pray and say, I am trusting on you as my Savior and your forgiveness rather than my own justification. And you know how Jesus just says that? You know, he lands it right there. And it's just a good word, isn't it? Isn't that just a good word, a good reminder? And then also a reminder, y'all, that it's important that we know what it is like to be on the other side of ourselves. So let's not live in resistance, but rather responsiveness. Okay. And people are speaking stuff to us, or maybe you've never given them the room to speak truthfully, or maybe there's something you've hid where you've never hid, but you've never invited others in. We have to put that behind us as well. Okay. So I want to show you a visual. It's not from the work I do. You've been around here for a few weeks. You know, I do work, I said, you know, helping organizations get better. This is not one of our tools, visuals, but this is powerful. It's called the Johari window. And if you want to snapshot this, by all means, notice Johari. Now, actually, you know why it became the Johari window? A guy named Joe and a guy named Harrington developed this. And this is such a good way to calibrate or scatter plot ourselves or have open conversations with people. Using this visual in front of other people, if you have a story to tell, it could be really powerful. You know, rather than being so ashamed and all that, you can say, I want to open up on something. So let me explain it really quickly, and I'll go back and forth on the stage. But this column, this left column, the green and the yellow, that is describing what we know about ourselves. And some things others know. Right? Like, you know my age, I know my age. Right? It's things like that. Everybody knows that. That's the open area. But before we go here to the bottom, let's just go here. There's this other side that's not known to me. I don't truly know what it's like on the other side of myself. I grow in that, but I don't truly know everything. So other people, you know, the rest of the 8 billion people on earth get to have an impression or a reflection on me. And if I'm going to yeah-but that to death, I might as well be a Pharisee. Okay. And then, so there's blind spots and there's unknown things as far as other people go. So here's the main thing. Now, I started in the green area, but down in this gray area, unknown, that stuff I don't know and other people don't know. Even the Apostle Paul says, I don't get it. I don't get myself sometimes. Right? That's unknown. It's known to God. I would expect in the new creation, it's like, hey, here's how your neural synapses works. And here's where you had false beliefs, and here's where, you know, but just like the songs that we sang in the spirit of this church, it is not it's not nothing to batter people with. There's just things we don't know about ourselves, and you kind of go, well, all right, and others don't know it either. Where we want to pay attention is where we have some agency, where we can do something about some things. So guess what? When other people, I'll go over here, when other people see things that we don't know, we have to have enough humility to realize we have blind spots. And this is why the visual can work, actually. Hey, let's have a conversation, honey. You know, the kids have been trying to tell me, I think you've been trying to tell me. I mean, I know you're not going to, I'm just inviting you, please don't beat me up on this, but I'm going to be receptive. You know, what are my blind spots? You know, this is not the time to weaponize, by the way, on people. But then there's this space, and you can see it's the hidden areas. I know it, others don't know it, like Mr. Jones, you know. So you could, we're not, somebody should do this for me, please. You know, you could turn this into a visual, because this is what we want. We want this green to grow, right? We want the green to grow. And I got to tell you, and would anybody amen me with this? But it's actually, once you get to there where you can say some things out loud, and other people say, yeah, we get it. Am I right that there could be some fist bumps, or yeah, you, or yeah, me, or am I right on that? Would anybody like dare to amen me on that? It's such a preferred way to live, you know, to be open and honest. And I know it's hard, but it's not that hard. It's not that hard. Once you make, let's just say I'm gonna step into humility. All right. So let's wrap it up. Okay. The way to up is actually down. 25% turn make all the difference in the world. All right? Are you with me? Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray a prayer over us, and then we're going to actually go into this ponder moment, right? So these are the questions to ponder, and it basically looks like this. And I'm going to pray, and then you're going to see the stage will populate. The worship team is going to come back up. But even they will be talking with each other, because here's what I'm inviting. You know, just where's your thought? Where could a quarter turn do you some good? And you may want to tell somebody next to you. You might want to tell somebody you don't even know. Like, there's some psychological safety in that, you know. What's it like to be on the other side of me? You know, am I really honest about that, or do I even know, or would anyone tell me? Who's my trusted person who can scatterplot me and say, yeah, this is what I'm seeing, and then and give me holy feedback, right? That doesn't mean slapping feedback. It's like, I'm for you. I'm not against you. Just like the song we sang. God is for us, not against us. And then how can I apply Christ's kindness to my life right now? Okay? So you're going to hear music. It's just an invitation. You might want to journal. You might want to do anything. But you may catch eyes with somebody and you say, hey, I want to bring you in on something. Let's listen in on each other. All right? And then, David, you'll know when to pull us out of that moment. But I know you're having conversations too back here. All right? Oh, Jesus. You know, we're in that crowd where we're listening in to you talk about the Pharisees, and we're in that crowd where you're talking about the tax collectors, and sometimes we don't know where we are. We're all of it. We're all of it. But at the end of this road, the way to down is up, and that's what you invite us to. So God, even in this moment, do your work in us, that we may just find the liberation of being known, along with being unashamed, because we are who you say we are. In Jesus' name, amen.